From the GRAYMAN briefing, this is a summary of recent developments regarding the Second Amendment, cybersecurity, protests, supply chain disruptions, national security, law and order, free speech, censorship, government oversight, and more. Now, the latest from GRAYMANbriefing.com. Here's this week's Sword, read out by Super Essie.
The U.S. Attorney General botches the initial release of Epstein files. Arkansas passes a law protecting knife owners. Border crossings in February dropped to the lowest levels since monthly reports began. Economic protest against DEI rollbacks and corporate policies continue, with planned boycotts targeting major businesses coming. Civil unrest, supply chain disruptions, and cybersecurity threats also remain key issues we'll look at today. There's also 2 cryptocurrency updates ahead. Let's begin with government oversight. The U.S. Attorney General released some of the Epstein files after the records were reviewed to redact victim names. The release was composed primarily of previously made public files. The AG blamed a New York office for failing to deliver all the related files. They have now been delivered, described as a truckload of information. The FBI is now going through them to redact, like we said, victim information, and they're reportedly going to release them publicly in the future. The initial release, however, was laughable. It appeared to be a minimal effort to appease the public. We are still awaiting for full transparency on this matter instead of seeing the release teased. For example, the House GOP pretended to release the files, but instead linked the files to a prank video. Also, that initial big drop was given to conservative podcasters and news personalities in binders, apparently for a photo shoot, instead of just immediately being released to the public. Let's move into Second Amendment. In Arkansas, a new law has been signed that adds knives and knife-making components to the state's firearms preemption statute. This means local governments cannot enforce stricter knife regulations than the state law allows. Arkansas is now the 17th such state to enact a law similar to this one, joining states such as Utah, Ohio, and Texas, among others. Supporters say this prevents confusion and ensures consistent laws across the state. Now let's move into the supply chain briefing. In Connecticut, major pharmacy chains including CVS, Rite Aid, and Walgreens are facing operational challenges, inventory shortages, and store closures. Rite Aid, which recently came out of bankruptcy, is struggling to keep shelves stocked as suppliers limit shipments. CVS and Walgreens are also closing locations as part of a restructuring effort. Some areas are at risk of becoming pharmacy deserts, where residents will have limited access to medications and essential goods. Experts say reimbursement rates for prescriptions are too low for pharmacies to stay profitable, and online competitors continue to gain that market share. Now moving into border security. In February of 2025, the U.S. Border Patrol apprehended approximately 8,500 illegal immigrants crossing the U.S.-Mexico border, a decrease from 141,000 arrests in February of 2024. This decline is attributed to President Trump's reinstated immigration policies, including a comprehensive asylum ban, the deployment of military troops to the border, and agreements with Mexico and Central American countries to accept deportees. On February 22nd, only 200 individuals were detained at the border, the lowest daily figure in 15 years. Additionally, since January 2022, only 2 immigrants have been released into the U.S., a contrast to the thousands released daily under the previous administration. The 8,500 crossings recorded in Trump's first full month is the lowest in history since monthly totals began being published in the year 2000. The last time a monthly average, using annual statistics, was lower than 8,500 was in 1968. And now the civil unrest briefing. In Madison, Wisconsin, protesters gathered at the state capitol to oppose Trump and Project 2025 as part of the nationwide 50501 movement. Around 400 people participated, displaying LGBT and Mexican flags while holding anti-Trump signs. The movement, organized through Reddit, called for Trump's removal, an investigation into Musk, as well as his death, and the reversal of recent executive orders. Protesters condemned Trump's policies, including freezing federal grants, rolling back DEI programs, and restricting gender-altering procedures for minors. In Rockville, Maryland, Georgetown, in Washington, D.C., New York City, and Arlington, Virginia. Anti-Musk and anti-Trump activists protested outside Tesla dealerships. In 20-plus other states across the U.S. on February 17th, anti-Trump activists protested at various locations at Not My President rallies. This was also 50501 affiliated protesters. They say, quote, they have been on the front lines of justice, marching in support of Black Lives Matter, women's rights, LGBTQ plus advocacy, and disability rights, end quote. The name of the movement means 50 protests, 50 states, one movement. Moving on, in New York City, pro-Palestinians have begun targeting and assaulting pro-Israeli citizens in a series of attacks centered around pro-Palestinian protests. Palawada, a pro-Hamas extremist group, organized a protest of 1,000-plus people that clashed with pro-Israeli activists. Multiple assaults were reported. In Huntington Beach, California, a former NFL punter was arrested during a city council meeting after protesting a plaque at the public library that spelled out the word MAGA, using the words magical, alluring, galvanizing, and adventurous. The former NFL player, as well as other protesters who were there, they called the MAGA movement corrupt and likened it to a Nazi ideology before engaging in what they called peaceful civil disobedience. In Marquette, Michigan, anti-Trump and far-left activists protested outside a U.S. post office and a courthouse, coinciding with the nationwide demonstrations against the Trump administration. Some held signs with messages such as, "No one voted for Elon Musk," "No kings," and "Respect our sovereignty." Moving on, in Loveland, Colorado, a transgender extremist was arrested at a Tesla dealership after causing $220,000 in damages. The dealership had reportedly been attacked 16 times this year. The suspect, a 40-year-old man identified as Lucy Grace Nelson, formerly Justin Thomas Nelson, was caught with explosives at the dealership. Authorities are investigating his motives and the possibility of a second individual involved, as security footage showed someone with a different build during one of the 6 incidents from January. Nelson faces state charges, and federal charges are also likely as police collaborate with the ATF. Also of note, while there is little coverage of this, those outlets in the mainstream media that are covering it are still incorrectly identifying the suspect as a female. They also omit any reference to the suspect as being a transgender. Now moving into cybersecurity. North Korean hackers executed the largest cryptocurrency theft in history, stealing $1.5 billion from a Dubai-based exchange, Bybit. The FBI attributes the hack to the Lazarus Group, a North Korean cyber criminal organization known for funding their missile programs through cyber attacks. The stolen funds have been dispersed across thousands of blockchain addresses, making recovery efforts quite difficult. While staying on this topic of crypto, let's look at the economy brief now. On March 2nd, President Trump announced a U.S. cryptocurrency strategic reserve that will include Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Ripple, and Cardano. Following the announcement, Bitcoin jumped 10% to 94,000, Ethereum rose 12%, and smaller tokens saw even larger gains. Trump says he wants to establish the U.S. as the global leader in digital assets. A White House crypto summit is planned later this month, which will give us more information. The inclusion of cryptocurrency in U.S. strategic reserves signals a major policy shift. The government's decision to back digital assets is expected to influence financial markets and accelerate mainstream adoption of cryptocurrencies. We're going to stop there for this week's summary of recent developments. Remember, these briefings are delivered in real time to GRAYMAN briefing subscribers, sent via Telegram and Signal apps, also via weekly emails. Please interact with this broadcast to help increase our engagement and views. Thanks for listening, and as always, remain aware, be vigilant, and stay safe.
Get unredacted, real-time briefings sent via email and through the Telegram and Signal apps by joining the GRAYMAN briefing.